Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a gamer between dimensions. When a boy wakes up in the world of Naruto with no memory of the past, foggy memories of the future, and a convenient gamer-like ability, so what's he to do? The only option is to get stronger and move forward. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 1. I looked around me and all I saw was darkness. It was neither cold nor warm, as I could feel nothing around me. My body was non-existent and I was but an empty soul. I had so many questions on my mind, however. How did I get here? What was this place? Why was I alone? Could I leave? Would I be stuck here? As I contemplated some way to kill myself, again as it seemed, my surroundings started to change. My surroundings started to feel different. Instead of the lonely, unfeeling darkness around me, there was now some warmth, and I could feel myself in some sort of viscous fluids. A contraction occurred around my surroundings, and I felt my body being pulled or pushed out towards a nearly approaching light. You have slept in a bed. Your HP and CP have fully recovered. With a gasp of breath, I woke up, my shirt sticking to my moist skin from the perspiration on my body. Ever since the day or night I couldn't remember I was born, time seemed to blur around me. It felt as if the past 3 to 4 years now had been a dream, and I could hardly remember what went on during that time. The weirdest part was that I felt as if a fog had been lifted from my mind, and I was finally starting to experience my life. Taking into consideration that I could still see the blue box hovering above my head after my internal monologue, I deemed it safe to assume that I was either dreaming, hallucinating, or this was somehow real. I found it interesting that I could recognize the floating characters as something that I had seen somewhere before, or maybe something I read about, but I could not remember what my past 3 or 4 years had been like. As a matter of fact, I could barely remember what I did yesterday. I shook my head from those thoughts and focused on my current situation. My memory seemed to have been foggy, for lack of a better term, until this morning. I had an ability eerily similar to a video game, and best of all, I could remember some odd knowledge about anime. Why would I need to have knowledge of anime unless I was placed in a situation where that knowledge was necessary? For making an accurate judgment about your situation moments after waking, you are rewarded +1 INT and +1 WIS. Alright, take stock of your situation and first figure out where you are. I figured that the best way to get started would be to figure out who I was and where I am. I thought for a moment. If this is somehow like a game, then. Status. Name, Jordan. Race, human. Level, LVL1 next level, 0/200. HP, 300/300 regen, 3 per min. CP, 200/200 regen, 2 per min. CC, 20%. STR, 4. VIT, 5. Dex, 3. Int, 10. WIS, 9. NG, 3. Points, 0. Rio, 1000. It was only mildly disconcerting that not only had I not known my name before this, but that I appeared to be not completely human, denoting the question mark next to my race. However, those were trifles compared to the matter at hand. I clicked on the stats to see what they all meant and to get a general idea of where I was. Attributes. Hit points, HP. HP determines the amount of damage or hits you can take before your body fails to function, and you essentially die. The more HP you have, the more damage you can dish out, and the longer you will survive in this world. Hit points are calculated through the following formula. Base HP, 50, plus Vitality *50. Chakra points, CP. Chakra if the life energy of every human on the planet, and is a versatile and powerful form of energy. It is essential to every technique and can be controlled and manipulated to create an effect that would not be possible otherwise. Chakra points are calculated by the following formula. Base CP 50 plus ENGY asterisk 50. Chakra control, CC. Chakra control determines how much or how little chakra you waste when performing techniques. For example, a CC value of 20% means that you are wasting 80% of your chakra when performing techniques, and you are using 5 times more chakra than would otherwise be necessary to get the same effect. Strength, STR. The strength attribute determines the person's overall physical power. This attribute affects the amount of damage a person can inflict on another with taijutsu, kenjutsu, bladed, or blunt objects. It also affects the amount of weight they can lift or throw. The average STR stat for an adult human, who has never trained his or her chakra, is around 10. Vitality, VIT. The vitality attribute determines the person's overall health. This attribute also affects a person's ability to regain health outside of combat and resist special types of damage from things such as poison, chakra draining, paralysis, burns, etc. The average VIT stat for an adult human, who has never trained his or her chakra, is around 10. Dexterity, DEX. The dexterity attribute determines the person's overall movement. This attribute affects a person's accuracy, evasion, speed, and ability to land critical strikes on an opponent in close, mid, and long-range combat. Dexterity also plays a major role in pickpocketing, stealth, use of weaponry, and the ability to dual-wielding weapons properly. The average DEX stat for an adult human, who has never trained his or her chakra, is around 10. Intelligence, INT. The intelligence attribute determines the person's overall ability to think quickly and innovation. It also affects their ability to learn, memorize, retain information, and determines how smart they are. The average INT stat for an adult human is around 10. Wisdom, WIS. The wisdom attribute determines a person's common sense and perception. Wisdom also plays an important role in learning certain skills such as genjutsu and medical ninjutsu, as well as defending from mental attacks. The average WIS stat for an adult human is around 10. Energy, ENGY. The energy stat determines the amount of energy the individual has and can be increased through training. The energy of this world is chakra, therefore increases to the energy stat will increase your chakra pool. Interesting, I thought as I looked at the information present. There were only 2 worlds off the top of my head which had chakra, and in which I could possibly be, namely High School DxD and Naruto. I highly doubt I was in High School DxD since humans did not use chakra in that series, assuming that the question mark did not denote me as a partial Yukai. The only other obvious option was that I was in the world of Naruto, in the body of a 4-year-old. Sighing, I stood up and tried to think of what my game plan would be. I was young, so I had time to train, but the issue was that I didn't know what part of the timeline I was in nor what nation I was in. It's possible that I was in some small lackluster area of the elemental nations, however, I would never know unless I left my room. I took a pause to really take a look at where I was. The room was quite large, and I could note the sleeping forms of a good number of children around me. Taking that into consideration, and the fact that all those sleeping forms were on beds, I could make one of 2 guesses as to where I was. Either I was in a largest rich family or, knowing my luck, I was in an orphanage that was well sponsored. I was more inclined towards the latter, but this was also somewhat good news, as a well-sponsored orphanage which could afford beds for every child could only be located in a well-off area. For using amazing deductive reasoning to understand your situation, you are awarded +1 INT and +1 WIS. I rubbed my temples as I contemplated what exactly I was to do next. I made a mental list in my mind for my impromptu plan. Find out what country I am in. Train to get stronger. Pending. I pinched the bridge of my nose. This going to be a long day. I had finally found my way to the dining table after one of the orphanage caretakers woke up the children who had been sleeping. We were all eating breakfast at some largest table, and I contemplated a plan to train. There was no way I was going to live a life of mediocrity, especially since I had such an advantage to my disposal. I needed to find some way to get out and exercise. Are you? There wasn't really a place in the orphanage that I could work out and not get caught. Though I don't think that it would get me in trouble if I started working out in the house. I just wouldn't want to raise suspicions if I started acting differently than I was usually perceived. Yorukun. I turned towards the source of my distraction and regarded her for a moment. She was cute in a childish kind of way with her short black hair and dark blue eyes. She looked to be around 5 or so. Looking above her head, I noticed dull glowing words hanging in the air. Emmy, orphan. LVL1. Rep 15. Can I help you? I asked. She had an adorable pout on her face as she replied. We're going to the park later today. Remember you promised to play ninja with me? Yeah, I did say something like that. No, I actually didn't remember, but I might be able to take this chance to learn more about myself. Seemingly satisfied for now, the black-haired girl turned and walked away. Not a second later did she seemingly remember something and turn towards me with an "I'm laughing at your misfortune" kind of smile on her face. Also, Miss Ayami told me to remind you that it's your day to help wash up the dishes. Have fun. Who the was Ayami? Ping. Quest alert. Clean Plate Club. Miss Ayami is the orphanage matron and she demands, your assistance in cleaning up after breakfast. Show her your amazing skills in plate cleaning and make sure there are no spots left unclean. Rewards, 25 XP. Plus 1 stat point. Failure, decreases rep with Miss Ayami. You'll probably have to do them again regardless. Do you accept? Y/N. Well, the game thing didn't give me much of a choice in the way of options, seeing as the N button was grayed out, so I mentally accepted the quest and got to work in cleaning the table. With the gathered dishes I made my way towards the kitchen and noticed an older-looking woman washing the dishes in the sink. I noticed other caretakers and a few other orphans doing what they could to help out. Since I didn't really know what they wanted me to work on, I just stood around the area shifting awkwardly for a moment until I was noticed by the woman washing the dishes. Yasaka Ayami, Orphanage Myron. LVL 15. Rep 20. Yura, please be a dear and help me with these dishes. I have a few other things to do that need my attention. With that said and done, she left me to my own devices, and I walked up to the sink. It seemed as if I was trusted enough around here, as she left me to take care of fragile objects unsupervised. I lightly sighed in relief as I scrubbed the plates clean. So far it seemed as if no one really noticed anything off about my behavior, or if they did, they didn't call me out on it. My mind wandered to what the outside of this home would look like. If that girl Emmy was telling the truth, then the orphan matron would be taking the orphans out to the park or something. This would give me the opportunity to familiarize myself with my environment. With these thoughts, I continued to clean the dishes and made sure I could, at the very least, see my reflection on the plates. I was a neat freak, bite me. Ping. Quest completed. Clean Plate Club. Rewards, 25 XP. Plus 1 stat point. Status. Name, Yorodon. Race, human. Level, LVL1 next level, 25/200. HP, 300/300 Regen, 3 per min. CP, 200/200 Regen, 2 per min. CC, 20%. STR, 4. VIT, 5. Dex, 3. Int, 11. WIS, 10. NG, 3. Points, 1. Rio, 1000. With all that set and done, I relaxed for a moment as I contemplated the mechanics of this system. If this was similar to the gamer mechanics I was familiar with, then it stands to reason that I should have the basic skill set that came with the package. Skills. Skill list. Gamer's mind, passive, intensity, 90%. Allows the user to calmly and logically think things through. Allows peaceful state of mind. Grants immunity to psychological status effect. The intensity level dictates how much gamer's mind influences your emotions. An intensity of 100% completely shuts off your capacity to feel emotion, while an intensity of 0% returns your emotional capability to its maximum possible state. Warning: due to your unique circumstances, the intensity of gamer's mind is unable to be adjusted. Gamer's body, passive, LVL 0. Grants a body that allows for the user to live the real world like a game. After a quick sleep, it restores HP, MP and all status effects. Allows you to master techniques and adapt to external stimuli much faster. Training gamer's body allows you to increase your healing rate. Your body is made with a high level of adaptability and improves on itself. Sleep allows for your body to fully restore itself to its peak condition. 0% increase to HP and CP regeneration rate. I hummed and thought as I looked over my skills. Gamer's mind solved the issue of why I hadn't had a mental breakdown as of yet. Waking up in a new and dangerous environment with foggy memories and knowledge would drive most people insane, so I was pretty thankful my mind was intact. The ability to adjust how much effect gamer's mind has on me was new though. This would definitely help me in controlling my emotions when necessary, and I wouldn't have to act like Root Ninja all the time. The most interesting thing, however, was the gamer's body skill. Not only did it have a level which was unfamiliar to me, but this ability even allowed me to have a greater ability to learn techniques and adapt to stimuli. I'm assuming it meant things like poisons and burns would have less effect on me the more I became exposed to them. This was even more unusual than what I noticed with gamer's mind, but it seemed as if I could improve on it to no foreseeable limits. I could work with this. The only thing that sort of bothered me was my inability to adjust the intensity of my gamer's mind perk, but I guess the only thing I could do was wait until something changed. Thank you so much, Yori, you did an amazing job. Why don't you clean yourself up before we leave? Ayami said as she came back from whatever errands she was running. I let a ghost of a smile appear on my lips before I nodded and started to walk off. However, as I was doing so, I noted the peculiar look Ayami was giving me, which made me somewhat uncomfortable. Had I done something wrong? What? She scrutinized me for a little longer before she seemingly found what she was looking for. No, it's just that I have never seen you smile before. I'm glad you're at least starting to open up. She finished with a smile on her face. I took a moment to digest her words. Had I really been so emotionless? What was I really like in the past? Regardless, I continued my journey to the bathroom to get a quick rub in. The bathrooms were large with multiple shower heads, but in order to accommodate the number of children here, there was little room for privacy. I went over to the sink to brush my teeth before I took a look at myself in the mirror. To be honest, I hadn't even bothered to see what I looked like beforehand. Like with my name, I had no idea what I looked like, and the only thing I knew was that I was male. As a result, looking at myself in the mirror was like seeing myself for the first time. Light brown skin covered my 3'7" frame. I was taller than most kids my age, on that note, and from my skin color, I guessed that one of my parents probably came from the land of lightning, or maybe even Kumobakure itself. Silver eyes stared back into mine with short white hair draped on my head. My body was actually well proportioned, and while I didn't have any muscle at all, I still looked like I went for the occasional jog to keep myself in shape, or whatever equates to that on a 4-year-old body. It was a little weird for me to see this stranger's body as my own, but I had to thank gamer's mind that I wasn't going all angsty and depressed at my situation. Having a nervous breakdown was not a good thing, nor something I wanted to experience anytime soon or ever. Overall, I guess I could call myself cute, and as long as I didn't ruin myself somehow, I would grow up to be quite handsome. I wonder what my old body looked like. With those thoughts, I finished brushing up and went to the shower. The warm water flowed down my body, submerging me in a state of bliss until it was time for me to move on. With a turn of a knob, the shower turned off and I went to get myself prepared for the day. Coming out of the orphanage building, I took a look around the environment I found myself in and took in the sights of all the activity going on around me. I rotated my body as my gaze shifted around when I suddenly froze. The great news was that I had finally realized what hidden village I found myself in. The okay news was that I was in Kanahagakure, also known as the village hidden in the leaves, which was home to a great many talented and strong people. The shit news, however, was that I could only see 3 faces on that mountain. I squinted my eyes and stood on my tiptoes in a futile attempt to hopefully catch a glimpse of another face on that mountain. Of course, I found no such thing. Gears turned in my head as I turned around to catch up to the matron and the rest of the children who were going on ahead. If Minato Namikaze hadn't been instated as the 4th Hokage as of yet, then what part of the timeline had I found myself in? As of this moment, most of my knowledge of canon was irrelevant, and that bothered me a lot, but not nearly as much as a realization that came to me. If Hiruzen was still Hokage, then I could be anywhere in the timeline from the Second Shinobi War to the Third. Cold sweat seeped in my back as the ramifications of this discovery impacted me with all the gentleness of a maglev train, all before Gamer's mind kicked in and calmed me down, allowing me to think about my situation logically. There didn't seem to be a need to worry, because the village looked peaceful, and I couldn't see any evidence of tension on the villagers' faces, but in a shinobi, village looks could always be deceiving. I had to fight back a grimace as I thought of what I should do. The most imperative would be to find out where I was in the timeline, and the only way I could do that was to find a character in the series that I was familiar with. Through their age, I could get an approximation of where I was in time and prepare accordingly. My overall plan wouldn't change though, because I would still have to get stronger regardless, but it seemed like the need for strength just became that much more imperative. This was a world where individuals could level mountain ranges and change landscapes on a whim. I wanted that kind of strength. No, I needed it. Not for some desire to protect my precious people, nor for some misguided notion that I could bring about world peace if I had overwhelming strength. No, I simply needed the power to keep myself alive and enjoy my life without fear of anyone taking advantage of me, and if it just so happens that I find people to care for along the way, then them too. I would break my body, reforge my bones, and claw my way from hell if it meant that I would be able to live a life with no threats to my being. I couldn't understand where this conviction came from, but it didn't matter because this was something I had to do for myself and to guarantee my life. I would not rest, I would not falter, and I would not give up until. Come on, why are you? Emmy yelled as she dragged me off to who knew were, breaking me out of my thoughts. It seemed like I had been inner monologuing myself all the way through the trip here, and most of the other children had gone off to do whatever it was kids did. Regardless, I forcefully pushed my thoughts to the back of my mind and I tried to appreciate the scenery around me. I had to admit that the park looked beautiful. The trees seemed to shine with a healthy green glow, and the area was surrounded by a variety of color from the different flowers around. I basked in the beautiful environment and appreciated the scenery around me as I was being dragged off to who knew where. Kids, make sure you don't go too far. I heard the matron yell. No promises. We'll be safe. Ha ha ha. I could practically feel the exasperation coming from the poor woman as the kids replied in their typical childlike manner. I merely allowed myself to get pulled by Emmy, and we arrived at a more forested area of the playground. It was easy to get back towards the main area where the matron was due to the visible path that lead here. I assume Miss Iami wasn't too worried about us getting lost here, most likely due to some sort of fencing of the area. Emmy and I weren't the only ones here, as a few other kids decided to join up. To be honest, I could care less about them, and didn't even bother reading their names. The only reason I tolerated being with Emmy was that she was adorable, and I wouldn't forgive myself if I made someone so cute cry. Bite me. Yo, are you all ready to play ninja? Heck yeah. I call being the friendly ninja. Me too. Me three. Hey, wait just a minute, Emmy said with her cheeks puffed. It's Yora's first time playing. He should be the friendly ninja too. One of the kids took a look at me and snickered. I think I'll refer to him as Brat 1. Emmy, why do you even bother with him? He never plays with anyone. If anything, he should be the enemy ninja. He's always by himself and doesn't talk to anyone. This was Brat 2. And the now dubbed Brat 3 decided to speak up, and he's kinda weird. Plus, he'll learn the game faster by being the enemy ninja. We're doing him a favor. Justifying your actions by claiming you are helping the supposed victim. I didn't know they started out so young. This one will be dubbed Annoying Brat 4. My adorable and dependable Emmy crosses her arms and leveled her harshest glare, which looked cuter than frightening. If you guys keep being mean to Yora, then I'm not playing. She finished her statement with a cute head turn. It's alright, Emmy, I stated while patting her head. I just couldn't help myself. But dash. No buts, I promised I would play with you today, so I don't mind playing the villain. This was as good an excuse as any to get some form of exercise in. Emmy still didn't look convinced, but she acquiesced for now, still with a pout on her face. She looked so cute that I couldn't help but lightly pinch her cheeks. Stop treating me like a little kid. But you are a little kid. Well, she was shorter than me, so she was little in the literal sense. I'm older than you. And I'm taller than you, so that makes me the big brother. Hey, get it? 'Cause I'm physically bigger. It was such a horrendous joke that I wanted to stab my brain for coming up with it, but I supposed it would work well enough on little children if Emmy's smile meant something. For all her complaining, she wasn't really making an effort to stop me from pinching her cheeks. Alright, enough already, let's play. The peanut gallery seemed to be irritated that we were having our own little moment, so Brat 1 decided to make his presence known even if no one cared for it. I rolled my eyes before regrettably retracting my hand. Fine then, but at the very least tell me how to play this game. It's simple, we're gonna hide, and as the enemy ninja, you have to catch us. Good luck with that though. He looked especially smug while I just looked confused. Isn't that just hide and seek? What's hide and seek? We're playing ninja. He was looking at me as if I was some sort of idiot for not even knowing what this game was. Quest alert. Ninja hide and seek? Since you are essentially an outcast, you have been made to be it in this game of dubious similarity to hide and seek. Find the brats who have put you up to this, and make them regret making you it. Rewards, 50 XP. Plus 1 stat point per person found. Failure, you will feel pathetic for letting children get the better of you. Do you accept? Y/N. I decided that arguing with him wasn't really doing my mental health any favors. Again, why do I even remember what hide and seek is? So I waved them off and selected Y. I closed my eyes to allow them to run wherever, and opened them to discover that they had disappeared to who knew where. To be honest, if I found Emmy first, I'd have probably just left the rest of them hanging, but since there was a quest, I sort of had to actually try and find them. Now that I was alone, however, I decided it was time to create some skills that would help me down the line and in this game. First, I needed to get a feel for my chakra, so with closed eyes, I took a deep breath and laid down on the ground. I focused on the center of my body, trying to feel for the energy hidden in my body. My focus never wavered, and I finally managed to feel some sort of warmth in my navel area, where the chakra center was located. I tried to pull at the warmth any which way, but it managed to slip out of my grasp. I took a deep breath, mentally psyching myself up, and with greater concentration, I focused on that warmth in my navel area again. Breathe in, breathe out. I repeated that mantra in my head and focused only on myself, disregarding the world around me. Ping. You have created a new skill: meditation. Meditation, active, LVL1, 48.67%. Meditation is a skill created through continuous inner focus. Meditation helps to sharpen focus and order thoughts, and it increases clarity of mind and awareness of the body. Passively increase INT by 2%. Passively increase WIS by 2%. HP and CP regeneration increase by 10% when active. Note, cannot be activated during combat. At higher levels, you are able to better sit still, and the rate of HP and CP regeneration increases. Now that I had a feel for what it was like to manipulate my chakra ever so slightly, I focus now on trying to spread that feeling to the rest of my body. It was noticeably harder, yet it didn't take me too long to manage, and I finally managed to grasp it. I'm sure that Gamer's body played a role in my ability to quickly grasp and manipulate my chakra due to its ability to allow me to learn skills faster. I was still trying to figure out how that worked though. Now time for the greater test. I grimaced as I focused this warm feeling, trying to spread it outwards around me. I imagined a dome of chakra around me like a domain, where I would be able to sense people, and living things at least. That was the general idea. It was significantly harder than expected, and I quickly realized that while it was a feasible idea, it wasn't necessarily the best or most cost-effective, since its range probably wouldn't be too great anyway. Plus, I could feel that I wouldn't make fast headway on this technique, because it was hard to get chakra to leave my skin without dissipating, let alone form a dome that was large enough to be useful. I put that idea in the back burner for when I had more chakra and control, and instead tried a different approach. Instead of imagining a dome, I imagined a pulse that would give me feedback like a sonar or a bat's echolocation. I gathered a small amount of chakra and forced it out of my skin in a pulse that was connected to me. It easy to accomplish since it didn't require so much chakra or control, and the results were amazing. Ping! You have created a new skill: Chakra Sonar. Chakra Sonar, passive/active, LV 10, 5.45%, CP, 5 per pulse. Chakra Sonar allows the user to pulse their chakra in set intervals. It is useful for detecting living being with chakra and for scouting, and it effectively makes the user a sensor. It is possible for this skill to evolve. The skill can be passively activated to occur at the user's set interval. The range of the skill increases 10 meters per level. Default setting, 1 pulse every 5 seconds. Maximum range, 100 meters. This was a very useful skill to own, and the fact that it could evolve and become even better was a bonus that I had not foreseen. Nevertheless, I decided that now was as good a time as any to put this skill to good use, and play some hide and seek. I adjusted the pulse rate to every 30 seconds and closed the window only I could see. I finally stood up, shaking my legs to get rid of all the cramping, before I ran deeper into the wooded area with my chakra constantly pulsing. I had to set it to 30 seconds because my chakra control was currently S, and at the same time, I didn't have much chakra to work with. I would be using 5 times as much chakra, due to my control rate of 20%, in order to produce the same result as I had 100% control. If I had left the skill on its usual default passive state, I would have run out of chakra in 40 seconds, let that sink in. I was cut out of my minute-long musing after I felt a life signature on my feedback loop and quickly approached the source. Since I wasn't being too subtle, I wasn't surprised when I heard a EEP and a scuttling of footsteps away from my direction. I picked up the pace of my footsteps and ran towards the sound of breathing and rustling leaves before I caught up with my target. I wrapped up my Vic target in my arms before hauling her up. I found you, Emmy. Okay, Yora, put me down. I surrender. She turned around and gave me the most adorable glare she could before I acquiesced. I simply shrugged in a "what can you do?" expression, patting her head. It's all right, Emmy, it's just a game after all. The little girl in question turned her head in a huff. Fine, but you better quickly find the others so that we can play again. I rolled my eyes. Fine, but you have to keep up. I could hear her growl in frustration as I ran ahead of her. I sent out another pulse of chakra and picked up a couple signatures in the vicinity. I slowed down and stood a good distance away from them before I noticed Emmy coming up behind me. She shot me a baleful look, YORU_. I slammed her mouth shut with my hands and gave her the universal hush sign. There are a couple of them around here. I don't want to scare them away, so I have to do this quietly. Looking rightfully skeptical as she couldn't sense them as I did, she replied with a more level tone, "How do you know that?" "Because I'm that good. Now sit still and watch me work." With that, I left the huffing little girl and snuck around the forested area. I used whatever pitiful knowledge of stealth that I could recall, and tried to make sure I didn't make a cliché mistake of stepping on a branch or something. I sent out another pulse to make sure that they were still in the same place and tiptoed around the trees while keeping my head low. Ping! You have created a new skill, Stealth. Stealth, active, on, LVL 5, 23.45%. Stealth is the fundamental skill that all ninjas learn to become, well, better ninjas. Having good enough stealth allows you to more easily infiltrate enemy lines, assassinate priority targets, and spy. This skill is subconsciously activated when you need to go into stealth mode. It grants you increased stealth where your every movement is subconsciously inconspicuous, making it more difficult to notice your presence and find you. Stealth infiltration, avoidance, and concealment ability are at 5%. For stronger opponents, -2% for each level they surpass you by. With the presence of this skill, I felt my body correct itself in order to better utilize my surrounding and decrease the amount of noise I made. My breath grew quieter, and my head lowered even more, and I snuck up on one of the unsuspecting kids. When I got right behind him, I quickly slammed my hand on his mouth to stop him from screaming and used my other hand to stop him from struggling as much. "Quiet down, I don't want to alarm the other one." I could feel him squirm less as he heard the sound of my voice, no doubt recognizing me. He turned an annoyed glare my way yet had a face of begrudging respect, which was when I noticed that this was brat number 1. I told him where I left Emmy and went on to confront my other prey. Quest completed. Ninja Hide and Seek? Rewards, 50 XP. Plus 5 stat points. It had been relatively easy to find the remainder of the kids, and they forced me to play a few more times since I was so good at being the enemy. It was a good enough excuse to practice my meditation, sonar, and stealth skills, and it had been a while since I had played hide and seek, at least I think it had, cause I couldn't honestly remember. Nevertheless, I played along. Unfortunately, the quest didn't reward me for the extra times I played, so I had to be satisfied with the increase in my skills. Gamer's Body, passive, LVL 10. 10% increase to HP and CP regeneration rate. Meditation, active, LVL 5, 48.67%. Meditation is a skill created through continuous inner focus. Meditation helps to sharpen focus and order thoughts, and it increases clarity of mind and awareness of the body. Passively increase INT by 10%. Passively increase WIS by 10%. HP and CP regeneration increase by 50% when active. Note, cannot be activated during combat. At higher levels, you are able to better sit still, and the rate of HP and CP regeneration increases. Chakra Sonar, passive/active, LV 18, 5.45%, CP, 5 per pulse. Default setting, 1 pulse every 5 seconds. Maximum range, 180 meters. Stealth, active, off, LVL 10, 23.45%. Stealth infiltration, avoidance, and concealment ability are at 10%. For stronger opponents, -2% for each level they surpass you by. All the running around really helped level up my gamer's body skill, which was really going to help me down the line. We were now following the pathway back to the entrance of the park where the matron was most likely waiting for us and the other children. And you were like an actual ninja. I couldn't even see you until you got me. How did you do it, Yoru? Practice was my short reply. Apparently, I was some sort of badass to these kids now that I had displayed my dominance in hide and seek. I refused to acknowledge it as anything else. Apparently getting the drop on them like a ninja every time we played convinced them I was cool. Not that they were wrong though. If it wasn't for the fact that they were so young, and had almost no awareness of their surroundings, I don't think that I could have been able to sneak up on them as often as I did. They made amazing practice dummies for the skill though, so I wasn't complaining. Hey. Do you think you could teach me? Maybe. Brat 2 spoke up at this. Man, that's no fair, you're always so nice to Emmy. That's probably because she's nice to me, and it also helps that she is adorable. I stayed with a blank face. The girl in question squirmed under the attention and looked on with a bashful face. We're sorry. All the brats chorused together. I quirked a brow at them and looked on in interest. With a chortle, I waved my hand back. Yeah, I forgive you, now let's hurry up and get to where the matron is waiting for us. Since they looked so remorseful, I decided to not refer to them as brats, but instead as kids. So will you teach us now? I'll wait me first. Hey, I asked before you both. I ignored whatever else was going on behind me and continued moving. Eventually, we came back to the area where the matron had been waiting for us and made our way back to the orphanage. I took a shower as I thought about my day. After coming home from the orphanage, we all ate lunch, and I helped clean up the plates again since I didn't really have anything better to do. Being a 4-year-old allowed me a lot of free time as I didn't have any responsibilities to worry about for a while. There really wasn't much I could do during the day, however. I planned to make of my night. I was pretty sure that gamer's mind allowed me to survive without any sleep, so I needed to take advantage of that and work on my skills, and at the same time try to create new ones. I turned off the warm water and dried myself off before putting on my snuggly one-piece pajama. Bite me. With that, went over to my room and into my bed where I kept a small stack of leaves. I picked them up during my time at the park after thinking about what skills I could practice indoors, and it dawned on me how suitable this skill was to practice indoors, plus, it wasn't hard to sneak some leaves in either. I looked at the leaf in my hand and immediately placed it on my forehead before closing my eyes and feeling around for my chakra once more. I had already gotten a feel for my chakra this afternoon, allowing me to more easily direct the flow into my forehead. Ping! Congratulations! You have created a new skill. Leaf Concentration Practice, Passive, LVL1. The leaf concentration technique is an introductory chakra control exercise taught to all academy students. This training method is done by placing a leaf over your forehead and directing your chakra onto the leaf, using it as a focal point. Every level, a new leaf can be added. This technique helps hone your concentration. Increases CC by 1%. Uses, 15 CP per min. You have gained +1 ENGY. Due to all the activities I had done throughout the day, my STR, VIT, DEX, and ENGY stat had increased by a bit. It wasn't much, but it was definitely something I welcomed. The fact that chakra control exercises could also help increase my ENGY was very helpful and provided me with a different approach to increasing my chakra. Status. Name, Yoridon. Race, human. Level, LVL1 next level, 75/200. HP, 400/400 regen, 4.4 per min. CP, 400/400 regen, 4.4 per min. CC, 21%. STR, 6. VIT, 7. Dex, 6. Int, 12.1. WIS, 11. NG, 7. Points, 6. Rio, 1000. I was very happy with the small increases I managed today, as I had managed to double my CP and increase my other stats by a good margin for the little work I did. I looked back down at my leaf as I mentally did some calculations. Since my CC was at 21%, that meant that I would be using about 4.7 times more chakra for any given technique. The leaf concentration technique used 15 CP per min, which for me meant around 70 CP per min, taking into account my regen rate of 4.4 CP per min, and my 400 CP worth of chakra. My skill cost a total of around 65.6 CP per minute, and I would be able to continuously use it for around 6 minutes before I suffered from chakra exhaustion. Just to be safe, I planned on stopping a little bit before that, in order to prevent myself from getting a case of chakra exhaustion. I knew that when the body had no chakra left, it would die, and I wasn't sure if my version of gamer's body would protect me from dying when I had 0 chakra left. It was best not to chance it. With that, around 5.5 minutes passed going by the amount of chakra I had left. I made sure to check my status at regular intervals, but even then, I felt myself getting tired. It sucked how my crappy control caused me to get tired so quickly, so I took this time to practice my meditation skill. I might as well be killing 2 birds with 1 stone while I had the time. I felt myself lapse in a state of concentration, and I could feel my chakra regenerating at a greater rate, but to be honest, it wasn't a large increase by any stretch of the imagination. My current natural regen rate for my HP and CP was 4.4 per min. Actively meditating increased that rate to 6 per min. Still, it was better than nothing. It took me a little less than an hour before I was able to regenerate my chakra, and it was the longest hour I had ever experienced. Seriously, it took me only 6 minutes to run out of chakra, but 10x that amount of time to regenerate it to full capacity. The only upside to this crap was that I was leveling some skills, but who knew getting strong would be so tedious? The increase to meditation's level somewhat lessened the time it took for me to regenerate my chakra, but it definitely was not enough. With that, I took up my leaf and pressed it upon my forehead, and went through another round of boredom. I distanced myself from the surroundings, and instead focused on the internal of my body. I felt the chakra sloshing in my core and flowing through my body. With greater concentration, I forced my chakra to flow upwards towards my head, but met with resistance. My own life energy was resisting my pull and command as it sought to flow freely, but I couldn't have it. So, I redoubled my efforts and sank into a deep concentration to the point where I was able to. My mind was crowded with the single thought of leveling up this skill. I felt some sort of mental switch turn on, and suddenly, I could feel my energy circulating in the direction I wanted it to go. I felt my skills improve rapidly, and the feeling I was getting was exhilarating. I hardly noticed when my hand instinctively grabbed more leaves to stick on my head, and I couldn't even feel the strain that focusing on multiple points on my head should have given me. I was so deep in concentration that I barely noticed my chakra go critical and dig into the low double digits until my body's natural reaction of exhaustion overcame me. I was begrudgingly forced to exit my enhanced state of concentration, but no sooner did I notice a dull throbbing in my head and a slight dampness on my body. I couldn't even describe that experience in words, but it was definitely novel. I felt like I was in my own world where the passage of time was meaningless, and I could actually feel my skills improve quickly. Comparing this to before, where I barely noticed any improvement in this when they leveled up. The only thing I was upset about was that this state barely lasted, and yet I felt exhausted. What the hell was that? Congratulations for achieving a state of hyperfocus. Hyperfocus, active, level 2, 64.57%. Hyperfocus is a state achieved through the combination of meditation and another skill that is compatible. Compatible skills mainly include those that do not require any movement to use or execute. Hyperfocus drastically increases the rate at which those skills level up by increasing brain activity to an extreme. By focusing all your brain activity on a singular skill, you essentially meditate with that skill in mind. The user burns through CP more when in this state due to the extremely rapid use of the compatible skill. Leveling of this skill will increase the amount of time you can spend in this state, as well as increase the number of times you can use it per day. Usage, 1 per day. Duration, 2.64 minutes. Ping. 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 Congratulations. Leaf concentration practice has leveled up by 3. Congratulations. Meditation has leveled up by 2. Leaf concentration practice, passive, LVL4, 23.43%. The leaf concentration technique is an introductory chakra control exercise taught to all academy students. This training method is done by placing a leaf over your forehead and directing your chakra onto the leaf, using it as a focal point. Every level, a new leaf can be added. This technique helps hone your concentration. Increases CC by 4%. Uses, 15 CP per min. Meditation, active, LVL7, 1.67%. Passively increase INT by 14%. Passively increase WIS by 14%. HP and CP regeneration increase by 70% when active. Note, cannot be activated during combat. At higher levels, you are able to better sit still, and the rate of HP and CP regeneration increases. I nodded in appreciation at the increases I made. In that one sitting of less than 3 minutes, I had increased my CC by an additional 3% and my meditation skill by a couple levels. Even though I was completely drained as of now, my excitement barely wavered. I was only slightly upset about the limitations of the skill, but the benefits all but made up for it. Furthermore, if I was reading this correctly, even if I was able to use this skill for a much longer period of time, it still would have burned through my chakra pool at the same rate, so I had to increase my ENGY in order to get the best out of this ability. I deposited my thoughts to the back of my head as I focused on restoring my chakra. I didn't feel tired even though it was pretty late at night, which was a good sign that Gamer's Mind was effectively keeping me as an insomniac as long as I wanted to stay awake, yet without any of the negative repercussions. My heart was still quite excited, and I couldn't wait to practice that skill again tomorrow. I had no idea what the next day would throw my way, but as long as I was given time to grow strong and train, then I was sure that I would be able to tackle the obstacles in my way. Chapter 2. I opened my eyes and took stock of the environment I had found myself in. The best way to describe my environment was that it seemed so structured. It was a world made of gears and parts that fit together to create a complete working unit. It almost felt mechanical in a way, how everything was set up. You like the scenery? I whipped my head in the direction of the voice, and standing in front of me was me. He looked exactly the same as I did, except that instead of donning silver irises, his were golden and slitted, kind of like a snake's. I was kind of jealous of them though, they looked so cool. Who dash? In short and simple terms, you. Did you just dash? Read your mind. I stared at him oddly, unsure of what to do or say, as it was apparently meaningless for me to do so. Haha, don't be so startled, kid, after all this. My lookalike paused and gestured to the surroundings. Is our soul, well, at least its surface layer. I pretty much live here, so anything you think, I know. I looked around with interest and took in the surroundings. There were so many questions running through my mind that I didn't even know when to start. Like, what did he mean when he said our soul? Who was he? What else did he know? Relax, kid, or you'll short-circuit your brain. Speaking of, I shouldn't be out here for too long. Wait. I said, catching the guy's attention. You nev dash. Who I am is irrelevant. As I am simply a shadow of my past self, you can just call me Jay. The man spoke before continuing. As for the other question, I brought you here because the sooner we met face to face the better. Furthermore, I just so happened to be doing a small adjustment to your body, so this was the perfect time to meet. I digested his words for a moment before asking, then what now? Now. The man started before snapping his fingers, causing a clock to pop up in front of us. He glanced at it for a moment before continuing. It's about time for you to leave. My eyes widened and I opened my mouth to protest. However, my mind-reading doppelganger replied before I could ask. The next time we will meet will be done through your own power. Level up meditation to 100 and you'll be able to come here on your own instead of me having to drag you here. He paused before looking into the distance, and following his gaze, I noticed a streak of black lightning appear and bounce off the gears in my soul. There's still a lot of work I have to do, so I can't keep these meetings sustained for too long. The system isn't ready to run on autopilot just yet. Before I could even question him about what he meant, and my body started to fade from the environment as whatever force keeping me in place dissipated. Right before my body left, I noticed my doppelganger turn to me with a slight smile as he said, "I'll see you in a few years, Yoru. Stay safe and don't get killed. You have slept in a bed. Your HP and CP have fully recovered." I groggily woke up and had to fight a grimace as a pounding headache assaulted me. My hand came up to massage my temple in a futile attempt at dulling my aching cranium. I quickly shook my head in order to clear it and shakily stood up from my resting position, idly noting that my body felt slightly different. I wonder what he meant by adjustments. Figuring that sitting on my bed wasn't going to help me figure that mystery out, I got up and stretched a little bit before making my way towards the bathroom, intent on understanding what had changed physically about my body. After arriving and entering the bathroom, I made my way to the mirror and froze. I was perfect. If yesterday I looked kinda cute, today I looked as adorable that it shouldn't have been possible. For one thing, I had some definition on my body even though I was only 4, and that should not have been possible or even look right, yet somehow, I made it work. My face was the perfect shape and had perfect symmetry on both sides, and everything just fit. My silver eyes almost seemed to glow, and my white hair looked perfectly well kept. My brows were a tiny bit thinner, but perfectly symmetrical, and I had a little less baby fat on my face than I did yesterday, showcasing some hidden sharpness in my jaws which would no doubt become more pronounced as I aged. You couldn't really tell unless you looked more closely than I was comfortable with, but it was there and I could tell. I was inhumanly adorable, and I wasn't embarrassed to admit that. The only problem was how I was going to hide my changes from the orphanage personnel. The changes I had were quite noticeable, and there was no way I could hide it from them. I tore a large sheet of cloth from my navy blue shirt and wrapped it around my face. The makeshift mask covered the portion of my face from the top of my nose downwards till it reached my neck. It wasn't perfect, and I would definitely have to get an actual face mask, but it was enough for my purposes, plus I think I made it work better than Kakashi. I really didn't want to have to explain to everyone my physical changes, plus I kinda thought that the mask look was pretty cool. Maybe I could say it was like a Kekei Genkai? With that, I brushed my teeth. Obviously without the cloth on. I came back to the room soon after and got a change of clothes. I didn't have many, but it was enough for me, so I didn't complain. I laid down on my bed and decided to practice my meditation a little more before the sun fully rose. Fun fact, you actually didn't need to be cross-legged while you meditated, that was just a generalization. The most important thing was how comfortable you were in your position, and needless to say, I was more comfortable laying down than sitting cross-legged any day. I was really curious about who my look-alike was and what we were doing here, so I took his advice to heart and decided that I would practice meditation whenever I could. After some time, one of the orphanage personnel, who was kind of cute I might add, came into the room to wake up the sleeping kids. I opened my eyes knowing that she would eventually come my way, and when she did, she had this look on her face. Koto, Orphanage Assistant. LVL 62. Rep 70. Is something on my face? My face and tone betrayed no emotion. I filed away her high level for later. She quirked a brow. Do I actually want to know? I think it looks kinda cool. And with that, she moved on. After getting everyone up, we were made to set the table up for breakfast. It was interesting how we were taught some basic home skills even at such a young age. I was now eating breakfast with the rest of the orphanage kids, and I honestly didn't know how I was going to waste my day. I could go to the library, but I think I needed like an escort, or at least someone who was willing to put up with me. Most 4-year-olds couldn't read books with more than a paragraph a page, but then again kids were forced to mature quickly in this world. I mean, Kakashi was a genin at 5, at least if my memory wasn't wrong, so he had to be able to do what shinobi were required to know as a genin. I gulped down my OJ as it really started to hit me how boring being 4 was. Why couldn't I have regained consciousness, or whatever had happened that caused me to forget most of my 4 years of life, when I was in the academy or something? At the very least I would have something interesting to look forward to. I quickly finished my breakfast and washed my plates. Maybe I could sneak out or something if we went out later today. I could find my way back to the orphanage at any time, so I wasn't worried about getting lost. Yeah, that could work. After putting the plates on the rack, I made my way to my room and just relaxed on my bed. No one expected much from us kids. Though I did notice that I was treated slightly more maturely than the other kids my age and even older. Probably just due to how I acted, because apparently, I was a complete loner before, but I always did what I was told to do without complaining. As a matter of fact, Koto couldn't tell me a moment when she saw me cry, though she did admit that she wasn't always here, and that this was more of a part-time job for her. Yoru. I signed and opened an eye as I was forced from my meditative state. Well, speak of the devil. Koto. I began as I looked towards her. Don't you know that children my age need sleep to grow? There was mirth in her expression as she replied, the fact that you refer to yourself as a child even though you don't act like one is interesting, don't you think? Was she always like this? What can I help you with, Miss Koto? I just need some help fixing up the beds, and I know that you are the only one who can actually do it correctly. Quest alert. Bead head. Miss Koto is a part-time orphanage worker and she demands, your assistance for setting up the beds. Just make sure they are well made and presentable. Rewards, 25 XP. Plus 1 stat point. Failure, decreases rep with Miss Kono. It would not be in your best health interests to fail. Do you accept? Y/N. I sighed and got up from my bed. Fine, but I'm going to mess up my bed anyway, so I won't bother fixing it. That's fine, she said as she looked satisfied. Why couldn't she just ask the other personnel to help her? I decided I didn't care enough to find out, so, with my face mask still on, I made up some of the beds as Koto did her end. It didn't take too long to fix them up, and with a little bit of time, we were all finished. Quest alert. Bead head. Rewards, 25 XP. Plus 1 stat point. Seemingly satisfied, Koto let a smile dawn her features before regarding me for a moment. So, do you have any plans for today? I'm 4. I honestly thought that alone would answer her question. After all, what kind of 4 years old has plans for the day? The only thing we could really do well was eat and sleep. Apparently, she didn't think so. We both know that you don't act 4. Come on, I promise I won't tell on you. She responded with a wink. I decided that I might as well let her know what I was planning on doing. It wasn't like any harm would come to telling her, and she seemed to treat me more as a boy and less as a child. I was planning on ditching everyone if we went outside. I'm so bored you wouldn't even imagine. Maybe I might find something interesting along the way. She looked at me carefully before smiling while shaking her head. Sometimes, I don't even know what is going on through your head. You're a pretty interesting kid, you know. But then she leveled me a stern gaze. Just make sure you don't cause any trouble for anyone, okay? Yes, ma'am. I guess she was satisfied enough since she just nodded and left me to my own devices. Now with that out of the way, I could meditate in peace until it was time for the rest of the kids and I to leave. Hopefully I would see something interesting. Good news is that I was able to successfully ditch the group of orphans and managed to evade Emmy, though I kind of felt bad for the poor girl. I'll make it up to her sometime. We had left the orphanage after eating lunch, and we were to go on a little walk around the village just to relax and stuff. Bad news was that I was kinda maybe definitely lost. I may have taken a couple back roads and shortcuts around the village, so that I could see as much of it as possible in as little time. Only problem was that I didn't actually know where these shortcuts lead to, and asking villagers for directions either resulted in me being ignored, or if they did answer, I didn't actually know what to make of the directions. I didn't have eidetic memory, so even if they pointed me at some places, and would tell me the rest of the directions, I would forget about which left I was supposed to take at which street. Why did I believe that I knew my way around the village when I had only been to the park? Well, that was how I found myself in a forested area of the village. How I went from populated to forested was beyond me, but hey, maybe I could use this place to practice some things. I eventually came across a clearing, and damn did it look beautiful. I could see the peaks of two small mountains where the valley in between them could hold the setting sun, creating a wonderful picturesque view. I noted the three cylindrical wooden beams jutting from the ground, around which were some broken or damaged kunai. Finally, there was a clear pond ahead of me that just added more beauty to the picture. I got myself out of those thoughts and looked at the area. I might as well start doing some other forms of practice and start making some new skills. I walked up to a tree and placed a foot on it while channeling chakra in that direction. Not too much that I would explode off, but not too little that I would just fall. When I thought that I had put enough chakra in my foot, I tried to stand. Then promptly fell on my ass. Ow. I grumbled as I rubbed my sore behind and looked at the tree sternly and decided that I would not leave this area till I could step up on that tree. With more determination than I thought possible, I decided to give myself a running start and channeled chakra into the soles of my foot as soon as it came in contact with the tree. I promptly cracked the tree and fell onto the ground. Ping! Chakra reinforcement, active/passive, LVL1, 34.26%. Chakra reinforcement allows the user to focus chakra internally through their body for added offensive, defensive, and evasive capabilities. It is a basic chakra manipulation skill that becomes practically second nature the more you use it, making it effectively passive. Grants a 1% increase in STR when active. Grants a 1% increase in DEX when active. Increase durability by 0.5% when active. Cost, 100 CP. Gamer's Mind saved me from acting out at this embarrassment, which told me that getting angry wasn't going to help me win this war against nature. I decided to look at the bright side and appreciate the skill I made, though this told me that I was obviously using more chakra than I should have in that last stunt. I took a deep breath and tried again. And again. And again. And again. And again. Chakra reinforcement has leveled up by 1. Chakra reinforcement has leveled up by 1. Gamer's body has leveled up by 1. Gamer's body has leveled up by 1. Until finally. Ping! You have created a new skill. Tree climbing, active, LVL1, 34.52%. By using your chakra to stick to surfaces, you can now move more freely and better use your chakra. Increases CC by 1%. Uses, 25 CP per min. That took much longer than expected. I thought as I created the skill after all that time. It had taken me a couple hours from me accidentally using chakra reinforcement and wasting my chakra to having to meditate in order to restore my CP. I never thought it would be so difficult to climb up the tree with chakra, though I did wonder how I knew to do that. I shook my head before finding my way back to the base of the tree. With that all set and done, I decided to take a break and look over my stats and skills to see what minuscule improvements I made throughout this time. Chakra reinforcement, active, LVL3, 34.26%. Grants a 3% increase in STR when active. Grants a 3% increase in DEX when active. Increase durability by 1.5% when active. Cost, 100 CP. Gamer's body, passive, LVL 12. 12% increase to HP and CP regeneration rate. 12% increase to HP and CP. Meditation, active, LVL 15, 48.67%. Passively increase INT by 30%. Passively increase WIS by 30%. HP and CP regeneration increase by 150% when active. Note, cannot be activated during combat. At higher levels you are able to better sit still, and the rate of HP and MP regeneration increases. Name, Jordan. Race, human. Level, LVL1 next level, 100/200. HP, 504/504 regen, 5.64 per min. CP, 100/504 regen, 5.64 per min. CC, 30%. STR, 7. VIT, 8. Dex, 8. Int, 14.1. WIS, 13. NG, 8. Points, 7. Rio, 1000. Note, due to the changes made to your physique, gamer's body has been improved. The improvements have been shown accordingly. Neat. I hummed and thought as I gazed at the improvements. So this is what that guy had meant by adjustments to my body. My gamer's body not also increased my base HP and CP, instead of just their regeneration rates, which was much more helpful than the cosmetic changes I had gotten. It wasn't that the physical improvements to my face and body weren't good, they just weren't really that useful to me at my current age. I stretched my limbs and looked at the sun. There was still a lot of daylight left, and for whatever reason, I felt that Kodo would cover for me. Call it intuition. Now I wonder what else I call. I'm letting you know right now that I will become Hokage someday. Good on you, Obito. You are definitely mocking me, Kakashi. No, those are just your insecurities. Obito, you shouldn't start arguments with Kakashi. We are a team now after all. Rin, you always take his side. It's no fair. I'm happy you all are so lively, but we still have a test to take, and it looks like we have an unexpected guest. At that I could feel 4 pairs of eyes looking at me, either in curiosity, interest, or disinterest. And it was with this introduction that I gazed upon 4 forms. The first one had spiky silver hair slightly oriented to his left side, and most of his face was covered with a face mask which looked a lot better than the impromptu face mask I was currently still wearing. I almost kind of forgot I even had it on. He wore a blue uniform with a brown sword strap that created an X shape across his shirt. He had black eyes and a Konoha headband strapped to his head. The next notable individual was a cute female of average height for her age. She had straight brown hair, which was cut in a chin-length bob that framed her face, and brown eyes. She also had a rectangular purple marking on either side of her cheeks. She wore a long-sleeved black top and a light purple apron skirt, under which she wore black shorts. She also wore the standard Konoha forehead protector, along with a pair of sandals, red stockings that stopped at her thighs, and a small, red bracelet on her left wrist. As for why I was so descriptive of her attire, well, it was because she was a cute girl, bite me. Next to her was a boy that had black eyes and short, spiky, black hair. He wore a long-sleeved blue uniform and a blue jacket with an orange collar and trimmings. The jacket was fastened to the rest of the outfit by 2 buttons on the collar. He also wore a white belt, shinobi sandals, the standard Konoha dark blue forehead protector, and a pair of goggles with orange lenses connected to ear protectors. Those 3 appeared to be about double my age, about 8 or 9. And finally, the most interesting of the bunch was a man with bright, blue eyes and spiky, blonde hair. He had jaw-length bangs framing either side of his face, and would be considered to be very handsome. His attire consisted of a standard Konoha uniform with 2 bands on both of his sleeves, a green flak jacket, blue forehead protector, and blue sandals. It didn't even take me a second to recognize those 3 individuals as Kakashi, Rin, Obito and Minato respectively, and as we looked and observed each other, I finally came to a couple of realizations. Good news was that I finally realized where in the timeline I was. Bad news was that it was around the time of the Third Shinobi War. In summary, fuck my life. It was then that Obito placed a hand over his mouth in a mock-whispering fashion and said not so subtly, "Hey Kakashi, I think this kid is trying to jack your gig. You should file for copyright." HN. I think I should sue you for copyright. As I watched Obito's actions, I took a good look at him like a good look at him. There was this feeling of trepidation my body felt as I looked at him, yet for the life of me I could not understand why. I brought up my knowledge of the anime to understand where this feeling was coming from, but I ended up with a blank. For whatever reason, my memories of certain parts of this world were foggy, and I could only recall the character names and their basic descriptions, but not who they fully were as individuals or what they would be like in the future. For example, I was pretty sure that Minato was going to become the fourth Hokage, but when I tried to think about anything past that, I came up with a blank. Likewise, I recognized Kakashi, but when I thought about his future, or what would happen to him, nothing came to me. The same thing with Rin and Obito and pretty much everyone else I put my mind to. It was as if my memory of their futures just did not exist, and all I knew about them was some preliminary knowledge about who they were as of this time period. I could remember that Kushina was the current Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and that she was good with seals, but anything more than that came up as a blank. I distanced myself from those distracting thoughts and decided to make my presence known. You act more like a child than anyone else here. I spoke blandly. The black-haired boy grinned and pointed to his headband. You see this? This means that I am officially a shinobi of the leaf, and no longer considered a kid. As a matter of fact, it's the first stepping stone to my path of becoming Hokage. His grin widened. As a matter of fact, this also means that I am your superior, and you can't talk back to your superior. He looked especially smug as he smug. You mean to say that as long as you have a headband, you can boss around civilians and they can't talk back? What? No, that's not what I meant. Isn't the premise the same? Your headband apparently gives you the privilege of talking down to those without one, and we plebeians can't fight back. Am I right? I tilted my head as I watched him grow increasingly restless. I love to see the day where you become Hokage if that is your policy on the relations between civilians and ninjas. What? And no. Arg. He grits his teeth as he glared at me. You know that's not what I meant, you're just putting words in my mouth. His eyes then widened as he looked at me, then at Kakashi, then back at me. He pointed comically at the both of us as he exclaimed, "No, there are two of you." Obito. Rin called in exasperation. I noticed that Kakashi was sizing me up and I was doing the same. Ping. You have created a new skill. Observe, passive/active, LV2, 9.89%. Through continuous observation, a skill to observe objects, situations, and people was generated that allows for quick information gathering. The higher the skill, the greater the data obtained. Information of individuals 2 levels higher than you is now available. Costs 5 CP. I'm embarrassed to say that I completely forgot about getting this skill, though in my defense, I could already see the basic information of individuals before I had this skill, so it just slipped my mind. Name, Kakashi Hatake. Race, human. Level, LVL 23. Rep, 2. There was also the fact that everyone here was a lot higher level than me, so this skill wasn't even helpful to begin with. Name, Minato Namikaze. Race, human. Level, LVL 115. Rep, 10. Name, Obito Uchiha. Race, human. Level, LVL 15. Rep, 5. Name, Rin Noera. Race, human. Level, LVL 15. Rep, 10. Oh well, I could always train this skill anyway. Hey, are you ignoring me? Obito yelled at my direction. I looked at him in confusion. Home? Did you say something? Obito's eyes widened in horror while Minato and Rin tried to stifle their laughter. I could have sworn that Kakashi grinned under that mask, but I couldn't be sure. Obito regained his bearing with a twitching eye. I was asking what you were doing here? Fair question, I found this place and used and decided. What are you doing here? That seemed to boost his confidence somewhat. As I said before, I'm finally an official shinobi of the leaf. Then he grumbled, but apparently there's another test that no one else talked to me about. Talk about unfair. It was at this time that Minato finally made his presence known with a few chuckles. Come on, settle down, Obito, it isn't that bad. He then looked my way, but he does ask an important question. Why are you out here? Where are your parents? Minato could probably kill me in the flick of the wrist, so I decided that honesty was the best policy and to not give him any sass. I was teaching myself how to climb trees. Also, orphan. Puffed. Puffed. Obito clutched his stomach in laughter though Minato looked at me with some pity, but soon it turned to interest and he smiled. Show me. I shrugged and stood up as I dusted my pants. Wait, sensei. What's so special about climbing trees? Anyone can climb a tree. I could hear Rin chastised him. Obito, you shouldn't make fun of the poor kid. He's probably just here to play. Minato just regarded them with a smile. You are correct, Obito, but you should know that there are two ways to climb a tree. You can use both your hands and feet, or you can use just your feet. Rin and Obito's eyes opened wide in understanding. But how would he know how to do that? The Uchiha screamed in surprise. That's not something we learned till we were in the academy. He can't be older than 5. I was a chunin at 5 though. But you are a special case, Kakashi. Obito stuttered though it was easy to note that he had a hard time stating that. The blonde jounin raised a brow, and why should Kakashi be the only special case? Obito stuttered and slumped down in defeat. From my new vantage point on the tree, parallel to the ground, I regarded Obito. Also, I am 4. I didn't even think it was possible for him to slump further. No. There are 2 of you. Everyone else ignored the pouting Uchiha as they watched me climb up and down the tree a couple of times. Not bad, kid. Minato started with a hand on his chin. You must have been working on this for a while, am I right? I grumbled in annoyance. It took me 2 hours to get this stupid exercise down. The good news is that I was able to make an attack on all the failures. I finished by pointing around at the multiple cracked trees, though I noticed something wrong when no one said anything. Why are you all so quiet? Rin had stars in her eyes. Kakashi was actually paying attention to me. Minato looked slightly interested, and Obito somehow had a rain cloud above his head. Interesting, did he have some variation of storm style? The future 4th side. No, it's just that it usually takes a few days to a week to get down tree climbing to the level you have it down, especially if you are new to using chakra. He must be exaggerating, right, sensei? The poor black-haired boy was in denial, though I didn't know that the technique was that hard. No, I could tell that he was upset by his speed of progress. Blue eyes locked to mine as he started looking at me in a new light. Not bad, kid, but you really shouldn't be here. I felt as if his gaze was looking past me into the distance before it refocused on me. Well, you should be fine if I show you the way out. I nodded since it wasn't my place to impede on their training. After pointing me in the general direction, I should take I was about to head out until Obito Uchiha. I looked back and noticed the black-haired Obito was looking at me intently, renewed vigor on his gaze. That's the name of the future Hokage. Interesting. I glanced back at him lazily. Yorodon. I'm Rin Noara. The brown-haired girl stated with a smile. Kakashi landed his lazy gaze on mine. Kakashi Hitaki. Then Minato smiled. You can call me Minato. Maybe I'll work with you in the future? I nodded my head. I would like that, Mr. Minato. I hope you guys enjoy your training. And with that, I made my way through the forest in the general direction he pointed me towards. I took a high vantage point on one of the taller trees every now and then in order to check my progress back to my destination. I climbed back to the ground to rest for a moment since my chakra was so low. After a moment, I stood up and dusted my pants. I'm almost the dash. My body suddenly froze as a foreboding feeling welled up inside of me. My heart rate screamed as I felt something, but for the life of me, I could not understand what was putting me on edge. It was at that instant that I felt a danger to my well-being, and I hastily tried to dodge out of the way of whatever was being thrown my way. It was too late. Ugh. I groaned in pain as a sharp stinging sensation came from my neck. My vision began to blur. I felt my body impact the lukewarm dirt beneath me. Ping. Danger sense, passive, LVL 10, 45.0%. Sensing danger is a natural survival instinct. The higher the skill level, the earlier it can sense danger. It allows the user to sense when a bad thing might happen. 10% chance of detecting danger. Ping. Poison resistance, passive, LVL 1, 35.0%. Poison resistance increases your resistance to poisons. As you get infected with more forms of poison, their effectiveness to you will decrease. Decreases effectiveness of all poisons by 1%. I couldn't even appreciate the new skills as I thought about my situation as my vision darkened. Well, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to die, at least not yet. If my assailant wanted me dead, there would have been no need to poison me. She could have just as easily cut my head off. I was more than frustrated that I had been targeted for some reason unknown to me. Why can't my life be easy? Minato gazed at his excitable new teen with some pride. They had passed the bell test, and he could tell that they were all excited about their results even if one of them had a harder time showing it. Ha! Not even a secret test can keep me from my goal of becoming Hokage. Asterisk psi asterisk abito. HN. You making fun of me, Kakashi? The future Hokage smiled as he gazed upon their impressional forms, before looking thoughtfully at the direction the young boy left. Aside from the boy, he had noticed another life form in the area, but he knew it wasn't an enemy since he could feel no malicious intent from the individual. He thought it might have been the kid's hidden bodyguard or something, but ruled that out when he found out the silver-eyed boy was an orphan. There was only one other reason why a shinobi would be out here in the training field without his knowledge, and that would be if they were stalking something or someone. Root. The blonde-haired jonin thought. He knew how they operated for the most part, and wasn't surprised they were stalking a kid so talented. With war rearing its ugly head, it was no surprise that they were taking more direct methods in acquiring talented prospects, such as the young boy. A child no older than 4 with such maturity and aptitude was very rare, and the only other individuals he knew with such character were his little silver-haired genin and Mikoto's own kid. He was shaken from his thoughts when his team approached him and Obito spoke up. Hey sensei. Are we going to do missions now? Ooh, maybe we can save a princess or something. Or save a country. Right. Right. We'll. The poor kid had no idea. /N, I just want to get this out of the way before I get assaulted with PMs. I know that canonically, Itachi is about 9 or so years younger than Kakashi, but this isn't canon now, is it? My thing is kind of AU and so the characters might act slightly different than their canon counterparts. Chapter 3. So, this is the child you told me about. Yes, Lord Danzo, he has an exceptional ability to learn and create skills, and he has displayed amazing maturity for his age. Intriguing. And you say he has also managed to display certain mastery over 2 of the 3 fundamental chakra control exercises? And by himself no less? Yes, Lord Danzo, but it would be best to ask him personally. After all, he has been awake for some time. And with that, I decided to finally open my eyes. It took a second for me to adjust to the dim light, and when I did, I took quick stock of the surroundings. Well, I wasn't at the orphanage anymore, which was obvious enough. It was a simple room from what I could see and didn't have any extravagance to it. Dark brown walls, a desk, and two other people made up the room. I groggily stood up, absently noting that I wasn't bound or anything, before staring at the two people before me. The one to the left appeared as a frail, old man. He had black, shaggy hair, and his right eye was bandaged. Looking at his face, I noticed he had an X-shaped scar on his chin, and he wore a white shirt, with a black or dark gray robe over the top of it covering to just over his right shoulder. Danzo, neat. I thought, somewhat thankful that foggy memories still allowed me to remember his profile. With that, I turned my gaze towards the other person in the room. The first thing of note was that she was a female. The second thing of note was that she had short, chestnut brown colored hair tied up into two mini-tails that laid on her shoulders. She had hazel-colored eyes and fair skin with an enticing, mature body. Her breasts seemed to be in the C-cup range, but the most important thing of note, Koto, was that she was the maid in the orphanage who looked after me. Well, I guess this explained her high level. I would ask why you kidnapped me, but it seems obvious enough. I started softly while appraising Danzo, bandages evident of either a horrific accident or, most likely, given the state of this world war. There's also the fact that you addressed him as Lord, indicating that he is of a much superior position to you. From the contents of your conversation, I assume that my peculiar talents interested you all enough to kidnap me. I paused for a second before continuing. The fact that I am not dead reinforces the thought that you want to make use of my capabilities. Then there's the fact that my movements have not been restricted, of which I can only conclude that you either don't see me as a threat, you want me to be more agreeable towards you, both, or you were neglectful, but I find that highly unlikely. Koto was looking somewhat amused while Danzo still looked emotionless. Seeing that they hadn't moved to stop me from speaking, I continued, and finally you had the decency to respect my privacy enough to leave my mask on. In conclusion, I can only imagine you want to use me for something beneficial for your cause. I don't know how long I have been out for, but I doubt I've left the Hidden Leaf Village. Oh? And why is that? The ninja maid asked with a tilt of her lips. Well, you have been watching me for a long time. No, not me specifically, but all the children in the orphanage, but I just so happened to catch your attention. I started, if Hidden Leaf had allowed an individual of your caliber to not only sneak into the village, but to also stay in their midst for who knows how long, then I would fear for the future of this village. Also, I'm dubious of the fact that an enemy would go through all the effort of sneaking into a hidden village, so that they could work as an orphanage maid. After all, if you want information on the state of a hidden village, working as a merchant, while old-fashioned, would allow you to get some information through gossip while keeping you relatively safe. I continued without breaking stride, if you wanted to infiltrate the village's ranks, well, I highly doubt being an orphanage maid would get you far up. All this without even mentioning the fact that working at an orphanage would definitely require a background check to make sure the personnel isn't someone uncouth. The risk would not be justified. I stopped to see if I had missed something before remembering something with narrowed eyes. I just remembered that Lord Minato had looked past me at the time as if he was looking at something or someone else. I hadn't made note of it at the time, and I'm sure no one else in my position would have, but it makes sense. I paused while closely appraising Koto. If you had been keeping your eye on me up until you attacked, then it stands to reason that you were at the training grounds when I was there. If that's the case, then Lord Minato must have noticed you, and if you were an enemy, he would have either captured or killed you. Lord Minato? What makes you believe that he is stronger than me? The woman asked with a raised brow. Instincts your level, I said and thought simultaneously. I feel a lot more afraid of him than I do of you, however. I looked at Danzo. I feel just as afraid of you as I do of him. In conclusion, you kidnapped me for some higher up of the village and, given the shoddiness of the whole thing, probably to use or train me for some secret organization. For your astute observations, you have earned plus 10 INT and plus 10 WIS. Ping. Congrats on creating a new skill. Lying, active/passive, LVL5, 38.86%. Your ability to lie to people without getting caught. This skill automatically comes into play when you lie. 5% chance of success. Minus 20% if the lie is too unbelievable. Neat. The room continued to lapse in silence as Kono looked at me carefully as if appraising my words, and Danzo stayed mute. He suddenly spoke, and do you refer to Minato as Lord because you fear his power? He asked, looking straight at me with his one eye. I shook my head lightly. No. I would say something about how respect is earned, but I believe that is a given. I consider him as such because even though he was clearly much stronger than me, he had the decency to treat me with respect even after I told him I was an orphan. I believe that since he treated me with respect, I would treat him with the respect he deserved. Surprising both Kono and me, Danzo smirked. It was barely visible, and you would have to squint to even notice that slight upturn of the lips, but it was definitely there. You told me that he was impressive and mature for his age, but you failed to encapsulate the magnitude of his character. You should already know by now, Kono, that when filing a mission report every variable must be carefully explained and key points must be emphasized. I am disappointed. Clearly, he wasn't. The chestnut-haired woman must have understood that point as she rolled her eyes and smiled. I apologize, Lord Danzo, for my negligence. I will endeavor to never make the same mistake again. Danzo's face turned to its normal apathetic facade, though it was a barely noticeable change. See that you do. Now that we are all aware of why we are here, I would like to know your response. I blinked. You're giving me a choice. Danzo nodded. It is a lot more productive to train someone who is willing to go through the effort. If you decline, we will have to remove your memories of this encounter. You would have fallen unconscious from chakra exhaustion during your training, and Kono would have found you and returned you to the orphanage. Afterward, you would eventually go to the Shinobi Academy due to your talents and become a shinobi of the leaf, or you could live a life of a normal human being. In the end, this meeting would have never happened, and you could live whatever life you choose to. I began to think. I knew my memory was foggy, but I was sure Danzo was much less agreeable. I see, then I accept. I don't believe I can survive another day at the orphanage, and I feel like the academy won't teach me all that you plan to have me learn. That is the best choice. Danzo started with a nod before looking at Kono. As for you, your negligence must not go without consequence. I swear there was a ghost of a smirk on his face as he continued, as of this moment you are coming out of your inactive state, and you will return to full duty as this boy's trainer and overseer. I expect that he will excel under your care. Kodo accepted with a smile. I will endeavor to exceed your expectations, Lord Danzo. He will certainly blossom under my tutelage. Then we are finished. Danzo started. I feel that it is unnecessary to mention, but I agree with your decision to train Yoro, and he is yours to oversee as you see fit. Within reason, of course. Now, you are dismissed. Thank you, Lord Danzo. The now active shinobi bowed before leaving the room, and I followed her in stride. As soon as we left the room, however, Kodo suddenly put a hand on my shoulder, and I felt my surroundings twist. I felt my legs buckle and my head spin before I was able to calm down my nausea. That was uncalled for. I stated blandly. You took that better than I thought. She muttered in disappointment before saying, always expect the unexpected. Right. With that, I took a look at my surroundings and noticed that I was in a well-lit living space. It was a well-kept establishment as everything was neat, orderly, and/or clean. The area of the place was small, most likely an apartment, with the kitchen connected directly to the living area. There was a small table in the dining area and a couple couches in the living room. Finally, there were a couple of doors, most likely leading to a bathroom and a bedroom. All in all, it looked like a solid place to live for a single person. Nice place. I absent-mindedly noted. The woman I was addressing nodded, "Thank you. Now as you know I'll be your teacher, and I expect to be addressed as such. I will probably run you through the basics today, but we will truly start training tomorrow. Help yourself to any food or beverage in this house. Do you have any questions?" "A couple actually, but I asked the only one I actually cared about for the moment, where will I sleep?" She showed a slight smile as she answered, "Of course we need to grow closer together as student and teacher, so you will be sleeping with me." I nodded simply, and she seemed pleased by my response before she looked at me curiously. "Why exactly do you have a mask?" "I'm genuinely curious if there's any other reason, but it's fine if you don't want to tell." My gaze was unemotional as I replied, my face changed, a lot. I noted that one of her brows shot up in curiosity as she asked, "Why would your face suddenly change? And how bad could it be that you would hide it under a mustache?" She paused as I removed my mask and showed her my face. "You definitely look different from before. How?" "Probably bloodline or something, though I have the feeling that making me look good isn't all that it does," I replied. She nodded with a thoughtful look. "All bloodlines have some kind of use, especially ones that change your physical structure. Tell me, have you felt any differences in your body?" I decided to tell her a partial truth. It would help me down the line if she understood that my physical limits were very little, and that she wouldn't have to worry about overtraining me. "I felt like I have more stamina, and I think my chakra has increased a little." She praised me for a moment before asking, "Flare it?" And so, I did. She looked at me with a lot of interest. "This is actually quite amazing, almost like an Uzumaki, but not quite." She muttered under her breath for a moment before continuing, "Your chakra pool seems to have increased by around 10 to 15% since the last time I felt you flare your chakra. While I can't measure the amount of stamina you have, if what you are saying is true, then this is quite the impressive bloodline." She was pretty accurate, I thought. Currently, my gamer's body skill increased my HP, CP, and SP by 12%, so in order to so accurately estimate my increase, she must have been a really incredible sensor. I guess this was how she had realized that I had some talent, but then. "When was the last time you sensed my chakra?" "When you were playing hide and seek," she responded. I paused in thought as I recalled that I had been using my chakra sonar skill more than a few times. I had no idea she had been around, but then again she was a skilled shinobi and a sensor. It didn't also help that my sonar range was decently wide, so it would have been even harder to have sensed her if she was on the edge of it. She actually looked at me curiously before she continued, "Actually, what were you doing to flare your chakra so wantonly around the area? Any half-decent sensor in the area could have sensed the signature you were releasing, and I don't think they would take to it so kindly. It's a good thing that you all were at the park and not someplace crowded, or it might have been disastrous." "Oops. I thought before," I replied. "I was playing with a new technique that I created." "Oh?" she asked with thick curiosity. I decided to explain. I really didn't feel like running around looking for those kids in the forest, so I decided to try to find them through sensing their small chakra signatures somehow, and so I created a technique to do so. "You created a chakra sensing technique to play hide and seek?" "Yes." She sighed tiredly. "I'm not sure if I should classify you as immensely brilliant or enormously dull." "So," she continued, looking straight at me, "how well does this technique of yours work?" "So far, I can sense anything in a 180-meter radius. However, in the beginning, I could only sense 10 meters. I know that I can improve the range of the technique as long as I practice, but I'm hoping that I could evolve it into something better and more subtle." "Yes, you do that," she said. "While this technique isn't really subtle, it can still be useful in reconnaissance, but if you can somehow improve upon it and make it less crude, then it will be like you became an actual natural-born sensor. Very useful in the field." I nodded my head before she asked, "Is there anything else?" I paused for a moment before I explained. "I feel like I still have room to grow, and that my ability might improve with some training, but I can't be sure." Now she looked even more interested. if you can increase your chakra by so much just by your bloodline awakening, but you can still grow. She muttered a little before concluding, no harm in trying. Worst that happens is that this is the limit. She looked towards me with a smile, you really make things more interesting, don't you, Yoru? I nodded. I try to exceed expectations, teacher. She nodding in satisfaction before asking me, do you want me to get you a proper face mask? I nodded in agreement before I responded, if it is not so much of a bother to you, it'll make things a little easier for me. Then I'll see that I get something like that for you. She said with a nod. Anything else I should be concerned about? I thought for a moment before shaking my head in the negative. She nodded at my response, then continued, now then. She started, pulling a piece of blank white paper, I assume you know what this is, right? I would hope all those times I brought you books from the library amounted to something. I furrowed my brows at that as I could vaguely recall that ever happening. I internally shook myself from those thoughts and nodded my head. Yes, chakra paper to test my affinities. I just channel a little bit of chakra inside, and then the paper will react in one or more of 5 ways depending on my natural affinity. Fire, the paper will ignite and turn to ash. Wind, the paper will split in 2. Lightning, the paper will wrinkle. Earth, the paper will turn to dirt and crumble away. Water, the paper will become wet/damp. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. She nodded, I'm glad you remember, this saves me the effort of explaining this to you. Since you already know how to use it, let's see what you got. With a nod, I took the chakra paper into my hand and channeled a small amount of chakra into the paper. It became damp and split in 2, one half turned to dirt and crumbled away, and the other half ignited and wrinkled at the same time. It was important to note that this entire thing happened almost instantaneously with seemingly no gap between each process the chakra paper went through. Natural water affinity, passive, LVL1, 2.50%. Your natural water affinity allows you to more naturally manipulate and control water-style ninjutsu. Passively increases water effects by 0.25%. Reduces the cost of water-style ninjutsu by 0.5%. Increases experience gain when learning and using water techniques by 50%. Natural wind affinity, passive, LVL1, 2.50%. Your natural wind affinity allows you to more naturally manipulate and control wind-style ninjutsu. Passively increases wind jutsu effects 0.25%. Reduces cost of wind-style ninjutsu by 0.5%. Increases experience gain when learning and using wind techniques by 50%. 50%. Natural lightning affinity, passive, LVL1, 2.50%. Your natural lightning affinity allows you to more naturally manipulate and control lightning-style ninjutsu. Passively increases lightning jutsu effects 0.25%. Reduces cost of lightning-style ninjutsu by 0.5%. Increases experience gain when learning and using lightning techniques by 50%. Natural fire affinity, passive, LVL1, 2.50%. Your natural fire affinity allows you to more naturally manipulate and control fire-style ninjutsu. Passively increases fire effects 0.25%. Reduces cost of fire-style ninjutsu by 0.5%. Increases experience gain when learning and using fire techniques by 50%. Natural earth affinity, passive, LVL1, 2.50%. Your natural earth affinity allows you to more naturally manipulate and control earth-style ninjutsu. Passively increases earth effects by 0.25%. Reduces cost of earth-style ninjutsu by 0.5%. Increases experience gain when learning and using fire techniques by 50%. Help yourself to the fridge. I'll be out for a while to gather materials for your training. Without even waiting to see my reply, my teacher disappeared in a swirl of leaves and left me in her house. I didn't know whether or not I should have felt bad for her, so I opted for indifference. she was a well-trained shinobi, she would get over it. I shrugged, then plopped down on the couch and thought about what I could do. Well, I could finally do physical exercise without worrying about getting caught, but I was going to be trained anyway. The only reason I hadn't done so when I was in the orphanage was that I had no idea what kind of individual I was in the 4 years blank period in my memory, so if I suddenly started doing something I normally wouldn't have, I might have been suspect. I might have been worrying too much, but since Koto had apparently been watching over me for a while, I probably did the right thing in just acting mostly indifferent. It was only now that I noticed I was quite hungry, so I went to the fridge to check up what kind of food she had. Eggs, Greek yogurt, a bunch of fruits and vegetables, some milk, and finally cheese. Yeah, that looked about right. A seasoned shinobi should have proper nutrition to aid in their training and growth. Well, she did say to help myself, so I made a smoothie with the milk, fruits, Greek yogurt, and ice that I found in the freezer. Then I made an omelet with eggs, tomatoes, spinach, and mozzarella cheese. Ping! Congratulations, the skill cooking has been created. Cooking, passive, LVL 10, 34.5%. The ability on how to cook meals and how good it turns out. Current level allows you to make somewhat complex meals such as lasagna, baked pasta, complex soups, etc. Hint: some meals can only be made when using a recipe, or having watched someone teach you how to cook it. Increases cooking speed by 10%, instant meals aren't affected. Increases the success of creating a new dish by 10%. Increases how well the meal tastes by 10%, instant meals aren't affected. Neat. It's important to note that since I was so damn short, I had to use a stool to properly use the appliances on the kitchen. I couldn't wait till I grew up, but I hoped I didn't become too tall or anything. Maybe around 6 feet or 1.9-ish meters tall would be alright. With those passing thoughts, I made my way to the kitchen counter and enjoyed my simple meal of eggs and a smoothie while I waited for my teacher to come back from whatever it was she was doing. Suddenly, I'm back. I had to force down my heart from lurching out my throat, and I coughed as some of my food got stuck in my esophagus. After gulping my smoothie to get the food down, I looked at Koto, who had just appeared behind me. "Can you not do that?" I asked plainly. "Always expect the unexpected," she replied before unceremoniously dumping a stack of books, a stack of tags that had Fuinjutsu seals on it, kunai, and shuriken. "These are going to be your training materials for some time before we go to more advanced material." I gulped down a piece of the omelet I had put in my mouth before looking at the title of the book she brought, Chakra Theory, Chakra Flow and Hand Seals, Different Aspects of Chakra, Human Anatomy and Physiology. I then took up one of the tags and looked at Koto, and these are for restriction tags. She stated before explaining, they help restrict your body's natural movements by a maximum of 10 times, however, they can only last a day at most and are stupidly expensive. However, I want to test how drastically your body will improve with such restrictions placed on them. I also don't want to risk stunting your growth by letting you play with weights, so this is a better alternative. She then pointed at the books. "You are a smart kid, so I expect you to quickly grasp the more intricate details on chakra, such as its different aspects and how it interacts with us through the use of hand seals." I nodded, then asked, "So what do you want for me to work on now?" The kunoichi picked up a tag and slapped it on the back of my neck, and I could suddenly feel my body become more, well, restricted. The paper tags eventually burn out, so to speak, when a lot of chakra flows through it over time. This is more so due to the nature of the restriction seal than the paper itself, but I digress. For now, I want you to read all those books on chakra theory while being restricted by 3x. It'll be thrice as hard to move around, so you should be able to get a decent amount of exercise in. Tomorrow we will start with our real training. With that, she took the omelet that I had yet to finish and had the audacity to eat it in my face. Not bad, Yoru. You might actually make a woman happy one day. Then she just up and tossed the plate in the sink and left me alone in the living room table with a stack of books in my hands. This will take some time. Day 3. Yesterday had been day 2 of my training, in which I still had a stack of books to read. You know, Koto seemed to have a lot of faith in my ability to learn and process this information. Either that, or she only expected me to understand enough about chakra that she wouldn't have to teach me about it. Honestly, there was a lot of intricacies about chakra that I hadn't known about before and would take too long to even fully explain. Pretty much chakra is a combination of spiritual and physical energies that can be increased through training and meditation, though everyone had a limit to how much their chakra could grow, and I wondered if that applied to me, though that got me wondering why my meditation skill didn't increase my maximum CP. Analyzing error. Error located. Patching error. Error patched. For locating an error in a skill description, you have been rewarded +5 stat points. Meditation, active, LVL 15, 48.67%. Meditation is a skill created through continuous inner focus. Meditation helps to sharpen focus and order thoughts, and it increases clarity of mind and awareness of the body. Passively increase INT by 30%. Passively increase WIS by 30%. Passively increase ENGY by 30%. HP and CP regeneration increase by 150% when active. Note, cannot be activated during combat. At higher levels, you are able to better sit still, and the rate of HP and CP regeneration increases. Neat. Well, that solved that mystery. I certainly didn't feel like my CP had increased, so this may have more just have been a visual error than an actual anatomical one. Due to the restriction seals, I had also managed to gain +3 STR, +3 VIT, and +3 DEX, but since that had all happened in the span on only a couple days, well, I still had a lot of room to grow. Name, Jordan. Race, human. Level, LVL1 next level, 100/200. HP, 672/672 Regen, 7.5 per min. CP, 1100/1100 Regen, 7.15 per min. CC, 30%. STR, 10. VIT, 11. Dex, 11. Int, 15. WIS, 14. NG, 15. Points, 12. Rio, 1000. Now my teacher and I were at an empty training ground that with targets all set up, and in front of me were kunai and shuriken laid about. The kicker was that I had a restriction tag placed upon my body. Now, you have 10 kunai and shuriken and 10 targets set up. I want you to try and hit as many of those targets as you can with the restriction seal on. I don't expect you to get any right away, so take your time. Afterward, when you can finally hit at least 3, we will go do some basic physical conditioning to get your body to the right fitness level. If you are still all awake by the end of the day, you may go back home, and we will call it a day. I definitely know you were about to say alive. Regardless, I nodded in affirmative and got to work with my sadistic teacher. Ping. Daily quest alert. Training arc. Your beautiful but sadistic teacher is setting you up for the worst torment of your foreseeable life. However, if you live up to and surpass her expectations, you will benefit greatly. Complete all the following requirements for as many days as Koto places you on this regime. Objective 1. Hit at least 5 targets with your kunai. Objective 2. Hit at least 5 targets with your shuriken. Objective 3. Complete 2 hours worth of physical conditioning. Objective 1 completion, plus 100 EXP, plus 1 reputation with Koto. Objective 2 completion, plus 100 EXP, plus 1 reputation with Koto. Objective 3 completion, plus 200 EXP, plus 2 reputation with Koto. Failure, Koto is secretly giving you 10 days to live up to her expectations. -1 reputation with Koto if you fail to complete Objective 1 or 2 in 10 days and every day after. -2 rep with Koto if you fail to complete Objective 3 in 10 days and every day after. Do you accept? Y/N. Only 10 days? I instantly clicked yes and focused my gaze on the targets before me. I believed that with my body and skills, I would be able to better handle all the things that she would throw my way. With a determined gaze, I strained to pick up a kunai before throwing it as Koto had taught me. Needless to say, it veered a little way off course since it was my first time. This might take a while. Day 30. The dull thumping sound of metal hitting against wood sounded out as all 10 kunai I threw landed dead center in the targets. Without pause, I took out 10 shurikens from my ninja tool pouch, 5 in each hand, and tossed them towards the 10 different targets. I was rewarded with a thud signaling that they had hit, and I looked to see that they had landed dead center as well. Congratulations, kunai and shuriken mastery has leveled up by 1. Kunai and shuriken mastery, passive, LVL 45, 0.70%. Kunai and shuriken mastery increases with the level of skill you have with kunai and shuriken. Increases damage when using kunai and shuriken by 45%. Increases accuracy when using kunai and shuriken by 45% in battle. Increases accuracy when using kunai and shuriken by 90% out of battle. A clapping sound broke me out of my reverie as I noticed my teacher come out from her hiding spot in the trees. She was looking at me with pride, but she sighed as she spoke. To think it only took you 5 days to hit at least 5 of the targets when you had your movements restricted to 1/3. Now you can easily hit all targets dead center even after you have your movements restricted to 1/4. And to top it all off, you had managed to survive 2 hours of physical exercise, even with the restrictions on your movements on. She shook her head as she looked at me exasperated. What am I going to do with such a genius like you? She asked. I merely shook my head. I wouldn't say I'm a genius, but that I'm hardworking. Terms like genius rub me the wrong way. It makes me feel like I simply gained all my abilities and never actually earned them. I stated lightly, conveniently ignoring that I pretty much had just gained a lot of my abilities. She rubbed my head as she spoke. All right then, hard worker, today will be the last day I have you on this regimen, as we will be finally starting some shinobi training such as combat, stealth, survival training, interrogation, etc. I do expect you to continue this kind of training, however. We wouldn't want to get rusty now, would we? Of course, not, teacher. She nodded with a smile. Then get to your physical conditioning exercise. With a nod, I leaped up to the trees and traveled to a more secluded but larger training ground. It was covered in short grass, and was the perfect place to do some laps. Koto had me doing the basics of the basics, so that it wouldn't have too much of a detrimental effect on me, though the amount she had me do make me wonder. It was a basic physical workout where I did as many push-ups as I could until my arms died, then I would do as many sit-ups as I could until my abs cramped, then as many squats as I could until my legs gave out, then I had to run for as long as possible. The first few days were definitely challenging, but my highly adaptable gamer's body allowed me to survive this torture session quite easily. But regardless of everything, I deeply appreciated my teacher. She acted like a hard ass all the time during training, but she was kind afterward. On a side note, I had this running theory that chakra was the reason why shinobi could train so hard at such a young age without many detrimental effects. I mean, how else could Kakashi become a Chunin-level shinobi at the age of 6? With those and many other random thoughts running through my head, I completed my 2-hour physical exercise for today, but as I looked at a skill of mine, I decided to continue going for a little longer till it leveled up. Congratulations, physical conditioning has leveled up by 1. Physical conditioning, passive, LVL 10, 1.08%. Physical conditioning is a skill that measures the strength, health, and overall fitness of the user's body. It is a passive skill in which the user trains their body to enhance both bodily function and physical capabilities. Passively increase STR by 20%. Passively increase VIT by 20%. Passively increase DEX by 20%. Passively increase ENGY by 20%. I slightly smiled under my mask at the bonuses I received. I was honestly surprised that I had even gotten a skill like this, but it actually made sense. This skill was like the physical equivalent of the meditation skill, where instead of improving my mind, INT and WIS, it drastically improved my body, and it seemed to be a perfect match for my gamer's body. The best part was that since both the training of the mind and body was necessary for increasing chakra, this skill upped my ENGY stat as well. The only downside was that even though I had gone through a month of torturous training, this skill was only level 10. I could see that this skill would be so troublesome to level up later on. Regardless, I was glad about my results and the progress I had made in this 1 month. The stronger I grew, the more secure I would be in the future. I noticed my teacher appear after I had finished my workouts and watched as she scanned me up and down for a moment. "Hey Yoro, flare your chakra for me." I realized what she wanted to check, and so I flared it. I noticed her eyes twitch before she smacked her lips. "I don't even know how I can classify your Kekii Genkai. Normally an individual would have to train for years to have as much as an increase in chakra as you've had, yet in merely 30 days, you have more than doubled the amount of chakra you had when you had before you awoke your bloodline. Let's not even begin on how drastically your stamina has increased by. I feel like I can increase the restrictions on you without having to worry about tiring you out. It's almost as if your body is adapting to everything I throw at it." She gazed at me carefully for a moment before muttering, "And unlike an Uzumaki, you weren't born with such large amounts of stamina or chakra. Instead your body seems to just grow at a ludicrous rate. If it was anyone who didn't know better, they would assume you were just a genius, but your growth rate is clearly unnatural. What do you think my bloodline is, sensei?" I asked while wiping the small amounts of perspiration from my body. The woman rubbed her chin in thought. "Well, it seems like your body is able to quickly adapt to any strain placed on it. The amount that your chakra and stamina have increased by shows that your body has quickly adapted and has compensated for your previous lack of them. I'm going to have to test how much your strength and agility has increased by as well to see if they improve as drastically as the rest of your body's capabilities." She rubbed her forehead as she muttered, "And I'll have to let Lord Danzo know as well." She sighed as she looked at me. "You never cease to make things more interesting and exhausting, you know. I didn't ask to be kidnapped and trained into a secret village organization." She replied in bemusement, "But you are the one who agreed to all this." It was still day 30 and I had finished my workouts for the day. Usually, after my training, Kodo would pick me up and make me take a shower before making us something to eat, and we would talk about how to progress in my training and what it meant to be a shinobi of the leaf. I didn't mind place enough, but I still knew that no village was perfect, and despite what anyone said, while Hidden Leaf was the strongest hidden village, it was not without flaws. All that aside, Kodo apparently wanted a bonding session between us as master and student. Kind of surprising really, considering she took such joy in watching me squirm while I practiced, but I knew she always had a soft spot. Now here I was in the bathtub. Naked. With Kodo. Obviously, nothing was actually happening, and she was just washing my back. I was accepting it all with a bland look on my face, both because of gamer's mind and a lack of teenage hormones. "I'm glad you agreed to this. I think that a proper student/teacher relationship should be that in which there is no awkwardness between them. I'm of the belief that it will improve training productivity if both teacher and student have fewer barriers between them," Kodo said, scrubbing my back with a soapy sponge. "That makes sense. So what do you propose?" The kunoichi smiled before rinsing the soap off my back and turning me around to wash my front. "Tell me something about yourself. It doesn't have to be specific or anything, but something that I might not have been aware of before. I feel like while we have lived together for around a month, we haven't really gotten to know each other well." I thought for a moment. I don't think there is much about myself that is worth mentioning. I mean, I guess the only thing I care about right now is getting stronger. "Why?" she asked, rubbing my hair with soap. I closed my eyes at her ministrations. In order to survive, I said simply while Koto poured water over my head to wash out the hair. And after you have enough power to survive? She asked, rubbing my chest with soap. Soap. Who knows? Probably live out the rest of my days as a hermit or something. I replied after she dumped some water on my chest. Puffed. The kunoichi laughed before scrubbing my legs. After washing me off once more, she gave me the soap and sponge, so I lathered the sponge with the soap and began scrubbing her back. I noticed traces of old wounds and scars there, and I couldn't help but run my index finger across them. Why did you become a shinobi? Was it something you chose or? She stayed silent for a moment before replying. It was mainly by choice, but I guess you could say I didn't have much of one. When I was around your age, there were already signs of destabilization from the aftermath of the First Shinobi War. Everyone knew that the armistice between the 5 great countries would only last so long before the situation completely collapsed. It was around the time that the village started actively try and gather potential for the coming storm. I listened attentively to her tale, while pouring a bucket of warm water down her back. It only took a moment before she continued, I was an orphan then just like you were now. I couldn't remember my parents at all nor had they left anything that would allow me to find their identities, but it didn't matter. Orphans more often than not became shinobi, if only to find an easy way out of their miserable lives. It was very bad during my time as the economic situation of the hidden villages was crumbling, yet more and more money was being put into training more soldiers as opposed to the improvement of the village as a whole. Naturally, the orphanage received setbacks, and as a result, most trained to become shinobi, so that they could make a name and living for themselves. I could sense a sort of humorless mirth in her tone as she continued. Of course many of them didn't and simply died halfway. Those who were able to make something out of themselves usually died the quickest if they weren't strong enough. It was around the time when I was 12 that the war began in full bloom, and I had already trained as a shinobi for around 7 years by that time. I was lucky to barely survive to that age, to be honest, and if it hadn't been for my teammates at the time supporting me, I would have died, but dash. She paused for a second before looking, then rubbing an old but visible wound on her stomach. Fast forward 6 years and around a year ago, they died trying to help me escape an enemy ambush. This was something I obtained at that time ago due to my negligence, and as a result, I got a mark to remember it by. I looked at it carefully and poked it with my finger. Kunai. Pierced my stomach cleanly. She replied, smiling. I would have eventually bled out, but luckily the battle had taken place near the village borders and I had been saved by some patrolling ninja. Long story short, my injuries put me out of commission for a while, but my abilities as a censor were still useful. I was contacted by Danzo and came into his service to help him protect the leaf from the inside, which was why I was technically inactive, but I still went to the occasional recon. I worked at your orphanage for most of the time as a result of my past, and tried to help the children there as best as I could. If I found someone with potential dash, you would politely drag them to your secret hideout and ask if they wanted to do more for their village. If they declined, well, that meeting had never actually happened, and they would be left alone. I said. I at the very least wanted to give them the ability to choose something for themselves as opposed to completely being deprived of choice like how I had been during the war. Koto then sighed as she resumed, but unfortunately, that option may soon be unable to them. Another war, I stated instead of asked, to which she nodded. I poured soap into my hands and ran it through her hair. I wasn't sure if it was good for her hair or not, but I highly doubted she cared for that sort of thing. You never really had the choice of becoming a ninja, because it was either that or living a worse life in the streets due to decaying economic situations. Due to circumstances, you eventually were able to work with Danzo, and try to help out children as much as you can. In the end you want to give them the option to choose their futures, but I said, rinsing out her hair, you know that in the end the choice may again be taken away from them. However, I tilted my head, you are definitely happy about the choice I made. I suddenly found myself in between two large soft things, but I was unable to enjoy the sensation as I was suffocating. I flailed my arms in a futile attempt to get free, but all I could hear was Koto's amused voice. Sometimes being too smart isn't a good thing, you cheeky brat. And which that she let me go. I took in the much-needed air and looked at the source of my anguish. Those things are dangerous, I stated blandly. The owner of those things smiled and started to dry me off before stating, it's about time we head off to bed. We are going to be doing something new tomorrow, and you'll need to be rested up. I nodded my head as she finished, and then I dried her off as well. Afterward, she went to bed, not bothering to put on clothes, so I followed suit, though I did put on my face mask. I've grown fond of the thing. With that, I plopped on the bed in my birthday suit and asked Koto something that had been bothering me for some time. Sensei, how do you feel a ninja should handle their emotions? I may have been a bit foggy on a lot about Danzo, but I did have the memory of his root shinobi being mindless drones, yet Koto was nothing like that, and in fact, while she wasn't the most expressive individual, she also wasn't emotionless, and could express her emotions normally. I noticed how she looked at me as if wondering what brought about this question, and I replied, I know you've been with me long enough to notice that I have a very dulled emotional capacity, so I was just wondering. Lie successful. Congratulations, lying has leveled up by 1. She regarded me for a little before replying, to be honest, you'll get a variety of answers depending on the individual. Lord Danzo, however, is of the belief that a shinobi should have impeccable control of their emotions, to the point where they could almost wear them as a mask. He believes that any decent shinobi should have enough control to feel whatever emotions they are projecting to the point where they can almost deceive themselves. That is how he trained his shinobi, and that is what I believe in as well. Seeing me look contemplatively, she simply stated, don't worry about something like that for now. We will have time to work on expressing yourself more, so worry about tomorrow instead. And with that, she went to sleep. This place is really different. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.